Hello everyone, Tidus here again with a Master Duel video, and today we're talking about the extra deck. So we've had some time with Master Duel, we've made some basic decks, some basic strategies, we got our engine types, we're doing our crafting for our hand traps as we discussed in our previous video here. Now it's really time to round out and put the finishing touches on the deck to take it to the next level, and that is including some of the powerful cards in the extra deck. So unless you're playing a trap deck that doesn't use the extra deck like Eldritch, or a control deck like Subterra Guru, extra deck monsters are a huge part of modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of types have their own extra deck monsters. Say the archetypes of Tri-Brigade have Shureg, Ferrijit, Rugal, and Drytron has Drytron Fafnir. And Zodiac has their huge range of Xyz monsters, as in Dryden, Borbo, Chonkanine, to name a couple. But there are also a couple of really good and very powerful generic extra deck monsters. And while some of the archetype and engine cards can be very, very cheap, similar to the meta staples that I talked about earlier in my last video, these extra deck staples, these really powerful, impactful extra deck staples, are also pretty expensive. So I'm going to try and let you know what are the good ones to focus on, and then give you maybe some alternatives and maybe some pretty good alternative combos to kind of help you earn your ranked duel matches, so you can earn some gems, so that you can work towards pulling these cards and crafting them. So the first big guy I want to talk about is Accesscode Talker. This card is insane and honestly should be one of the first cards you craft. Get your 3 Ash Blossoms and then maybe consider playing this card if you're playing a deck that spams a lot of monsters onto the board. So like Tri-Brigade, Drytron, things like that summon a lot of monsters that you can easily go into a Link 4. So what a Link 4 means is for newer players, and if you haven't really grasped what linking is just yet, a Link 4 means I can make this card with 4 effect monsters, or I can use 1 Link 2 effect monsters and 2 other effect monsters. So it's Link 4 is 2 for the Link 2, plus 1 for 4 for the Link monsters. You can use 2 Link 2s, you can use 1 Link 3, and 1 effect monster. So that is how the links kind of work, and what this guy does is everything. He can clear your board, he can do a lot of damage, so when you link summon him, you can target one of the link monsters used in his summon, and he gains attack equal to 1,000 times the link rating. So if you say, let's say we use a Link 3 and 1 other effect monster to make him, we now have an Accesscode Talker that has 5,300 attack points because he gains 3,000 for the Link 3 that you used. And then he can banish Link monsters of different attributes to destroy 1 card on the field. And the broken part, your opponent can't respond to this. So unless they effect failure you or infinite impermanence you before you use this effect, they literally cannot respond to this effect. So you can just go ahead and start popping cards if they have no interaction, and then hit them for a ton of damage. As I mentioned, there are some cheap combos to go directly into this card. I will kind of go over those when we get to our budget alternatives and some super rares and rare cards to go into this, but really try to focus on this card as soon as possible. He's so good and used in so many decks. It's crazy. He's just that impactful. But another one of the big heavy hitters is Appoousa, Bow of the Goddess. While she doesn't do a lot of damage, she's really good for when you're going first. Basically what this card does is, it's another Link 4, and then it gains 800 attack for every Link material used to summon this card. So if I use 4 monsters, she'll gain 3,200 attack. And while that seems really good, what's actually better is every time a monster effect would activate, you can pay 800 of those attack points, and you can negate the effect, and this is once per chain. Not once per turn, once per chain. So basically, let's say we use a Link 2 and 2 other monsters to make this card. Now we have 2400 attack. Your opponent special summons or wants to attempt to special summon a monster that is once per turn. We're going to go ahead and say Appoousa negate. She'll decrease down to 1600, and that monster's effect will be negated and can't be used again. Let's say one of your opponents summons a monster, say Alistair, and you want to negate the effect to stop the search of invocation. She can drop down to 800 after dropping down from 1600, and now your opponent cannot search with Alistair. This card is really good for going first. It's not used in every single deck, but is a pretty impactful card and a pretty good staple because she is used in a variety of different decks in the meta and is generally a pretty good card to go ahead and grab. She does have a couple of downsides. She can be negated, so if you set her up and then your opponent goes ahead and affects Valor's you or Infinite Impermanences you, she no longer has the ability to do those negates, so she can get outed a little easily, but in general I think she's very good to go ahead and get because of how good she is on turn 1 to stop your opponent's plays. But we can talk about another big heavy hitter, and that is Borrelsword Dragon. This card isn't seen as much play as it used to now that Accesscode Talker is around, but it's still really, really good and still used in a lot of meta decks that don't necessarily want to play access code or can't afford access code when it comes to the actual TCG. So this card is another Link 4 monster, and man is he a big boy. Whenever he attacks an opponent's monster, he'll drain half of that attack and gain that drain, so he will always do 3000 damage to your opponent no matter what. But he can target a card on the field and switch it to defense and attack again. Now let me note that Link monsters can't be put into defense, so if you have Borrelsword and another Link monster, you can't do this effect. But if you have Borrelsword and you have just another random monster that you have in attack mode, you can attack with Borrelsword, kill the monster, gain the attack, do the 3000 damage, attack with that other monster, and then use its effect to switch it to defense and attack again with Borrelsword, and it will attack with the increased attack that it had. So generally this can be up to 4000, 5000 damage depending on what you're attacking. And so this is a really good card for just pushing for that last game and going for that final kill. I wouldn't necessarily mean to like invest in him, but keep him on your back burner, especially if you're pulling the Stalwart packs. He is in there, and if you've pulled him, go ahead and add him to your extra deck. He's really, really good, and I think you'd be pretty pleasantly surprised at how many games he can just all of a sudden just win for you. Really good card. But now we're going to talk about another really useful card, and it's a Link 3 this time, and that is Nightmare Unicorn. This is just a great card all around. A Link 3 that is a non-destructive removal and has some good combos with another card called IP Masquerena, which I will kind of talk about in combo here, because generally that's how you'll see this card be used. And so what this card is all these Nightmare cards have this specific thing of text. If this monster is summoned and co-linked, which means the arrows of the Link monster are pointing to each other, you will get to draw a card in addition to activating its effect. And this one's effect is discard a card, target a card on the field, and bounce it back to the deck. So if you're targeting an extra monster card, like their link card, like a Borrelsword, you want to target it, and because Borrelsword can't be destroyed by battle damage, you want to go ahead and bounce that boy back to the extra deck. The reason this is really good is because it can work in conjunction with IP Masquerena. This card is crazy good. Not necessarily used in a lot of decks, but pretty good if you went ahead and got lucky and pulled one. Or some decks use it as a point of interruption on your opponent's turn, because this is a Link 2 monster that you can summon with 2 non-Link monsters. And then what it does is, on your opponent's main phase, you can quick effect go ahead and link her off, and then say you have one other monster on the field, and you link her off, and then you go ahead and make Nightmare Unicorn, giving you interaction on your opponent's turn, which is very, very strong. But what she also does is make it so that the card that is link summoned with IP It can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and that's really, really strong. So it's a really good conjunction to use. And Unicorn, as being a Link 3, it's kind of a great intermediate point in between, say, Accesscode or, say, Borrelsword, because it makes up 3 of the materials that you need, plus 1 more other monster, and then you can go ahead and put out a big Link 4. And then one last big dog I would kind of like to talk about is AA-ZEUS, or Divine Arsenal. AA-ZEUS Sky Thunder. This card is absolutely insane. The TCG, he is unlimited. The OCG, he is limited to 1. Doesn't really matter. Sometimes you're really only playing 1. The only reason it was limited in the OCG is because of the Zodiac cards, and you can make multiple of these, and he's just very, very oppressive. So he is an XYZ card, and what they are is usually they're made by 2 monsters at the same level, and you overlap them together, and then that makes these black XYZ cards. But this one's different. This one can be made on any of your XYZ monster as long as an XYZ monster did an attack, or has, basically, they call it battled. Actually, it doesn't have to be your monster. You can make an XYZ and attack with one of your other monsters into your opponent's XYZ, and because an XYZ battled, you can then overlay Zeus onto your XYZ. And what this card states is you can remove 2 materials from it and send all other cards but him to the graveyard. Now, this is where Yu-Gi-Oh! Gets weird. Sending is different than destruction. So a card that could protect against destruction will not be protected against Zeus, because Zeus specifically says it sends. And I know that's a little weird, and it's going to be hard to kind of get a grasp on, but he is very, very strong. Now, if your deck doesn't make any XYZ monsters, he's not something you need to be focused on, but if your deck is focused on XYZ, you need to craft this card pretty much immediately. This card is crazy. And then we'll talk about some of these like super rare Link 2 monsters that are kind of generic. And those are there's 2 Nightmare monsters. And as we remember before in Nightmare Unicorn, they have the same kind of effect where they get to draw if they're co-linked, but then their other effect is different per Nightmare. So Nightmare Phoenix is a really generic, very, very good Link 2. It is spell and trap removal. Basically what happens is when you summon this card with 2 different names, you put it on the field, you discard 1 card, and then you get to target and destroy a spell or trap card on your opponent's side of the field. So really good for Link climbing, trying to destroy a card your opponent controls to keep pushing for that extra bit of damage to make sure you don't get stopped. Another great one, Nightmare Cerberus. This card was used a while back, not really used very much anymore, but a really good budget alternative. He is also a Nightmare, so he has the other effect, but then he can discard 1 card, then target 1 special summon monster in your opponent's main monster zone, and then destroy it. So remember that the Link monsters will usually go in the extra monster zone. It's in the in-between middle portion, and then your other portion down there below you is your main monster zone. And it can only destroy special summon monsters in there. So a little bit of a niche use, but still a good Link 2. Out of the both of them, I would recommend getting Nightmare Phoenix first. It's just way easier, more versatile, and really good for spell and trap removal if you don't have very much of it. And then one last card, I can't really say it's a staple, but a lot of decks are using it, so it's almost becoming a staple, is Salamangreat Almirage. This card is just really good for combo starting. It's used in Tri-Brigade, it's used in Alistair Invoked. It can even be used in a couple other decks that are kind of a little bit on the rogue category. Even Cyber Dragon can use this card. It's just really good, and really it's just a Link 1 monster, so a monster that is normal summon with 1,000 or less attack, you link it off, you make Almirage, and then you can start some combos if cards needed to get to the graveyard, because that's the main point of some of these Link monsters, is some of these cards trigger effects when they go to the graveyard, and so you can go ahead and normal summon your monster, link it off, put Almirage in, and then start your combos in your resource game. So really good card. If your deck doesn't need this, don't even worry about it, but again, keep these kind of cards in mind, because eventually as the meta changes, it will probably be used eventually, and it's good just to have these staples. That's the crazy thing about a TCG player, is some of these staple cards are really cheap or really expensive, but once you have them, you kind of have them. And in this game, if you're a free-to-play player or a budget player, crafting these is going to be expensive, but once you have them, they're going to go in every other deck, so it's not really going to matter too much if you use the materials now, because you don't have to ever buy them again. So that's a really good benefit. So that kind of does it for these staples, and I'm going to talk about some alternatives and some different combo kind of things that we can go through, and some link climbing stuff that are pretty cheap. And the one thing I want to mention is this card called Accesscode Talker. It is a Cyberse Link 2, and it only takes 2 effect monsters. But if you pair this card in conjunction with Parallel Xyz, you can do some pretty cool stuff. I'm not saying this will work for everybody, but if you're looking and you don't really know anything about an extra deck and you haven't pulled too much, this card can be really beneficial to make as just a rare, and these Parallel Xyz are just commons. So what happens is when you summon Accesscode Talker and you have Parallel Xyz in hand, Parallel Xyz will summon to the point that Accesscode Talker is pointing to, and then Parallel Xyz will attempt to summon another Parallel Xyz and then make them both level 4. And this is where some crazy stuff can happen. You can do a lot of different things with this. You can go into an Xyz monster called Baguska, the terribly tired tapir. Not easy to say, but there it is. Basically, this card is really good for control. If you put them in defense position, any card in the main monster zone gets turned to defense and has its effect negated. If it's an attack, your opponent can't destroy it with card effects, and it has to attack that card. It's just really, really good. And then another option is Utopia. And this might seem a little weird to some people, but you can get Utopia for 500 gems in the Utopia structure deck, and it comes with Utopia, and then you can craft Utopia Double. And what Utopia Double does is it will double its attack if Utopia is used as a material. So there it already becomes a 5,000 attack monster. And then you can add a card called Double or Nothing. And so when you attack with this 5,000 attack Utopia Double, and then you play Double or Nothing in the damage step, this card will go to 10,000 attack for really easy OTK. It's a great little combo that was used a lot when it comes to just killing people really, really quickly. So Parallel Xyz has some great uses, because it can also make another card called Abyss Dweller. While this is an ultra rare, this card is just really, really, really good. What it basically does is it's a quick effect, detach a card from it, so it has the material underneath it, remember, because it overlays, and then your opponent can't activate the graveyard effects of cards during their turn, which is basically shutting off a complete resource pool from your opponent. But the other cool thing about the Accesscode Talker Parallel Xyz is you can do some link climbing. And really, so what you will do is the effect, or the link climbing of this is use 2 effect monsters to make Accesscode Talker. You summon Parallel Xyz, then you summon the other one. And now we have some lines that we can kind of go into. We can use those 2 monsters to make Update Jammer. And Update Jammer is a really interesting Link 2 monster that uses 2 Cyberse monsters. And really, he has one effect that we don't really care about too much, but it's his other effect that we really like, and I'll kind of explain what happens there. So then we can use those 2 monsters to, say, go into Accesscode Talker, or a cheaper alternative of Transcode Talker, which is a Link 3 Cyberse. It uses 2+ effect monsters. And then you activate Update Jammer's effect, and now Transcode Talker can attack twice. Transcode has some good things and some bad things about it. Transcode is really good because if you've only special summoned Cyberse monsters, so if you're using a budget Cyberse deck to kind of play and climb your link ladder, or your rank ladder, not link ladder, your rank ladder, he's really, really good for just going for OTKs, because he will target a level 3 or lower link monster in your graveyard and special summon it to a zone he points to. So you would use Update Jammer and Accesscode Talker to make Transcode Talker, and then use Update Jammer's effect as your first chain link, and then you would use Transcode Talker's effect to summon your Update Jammer back. They're co-linked. Now he has 2,800 attack, and Update Jammer has 2,500 attack, and Transcode can attack twice. Plus, they're untargetable because they point to each other due to Transcode's effect. And then you can go a step further, really, if you're building like a really good Cyberse deck, and you're having access code already, where you can do all of this again, but we don't use Update Jammer's effect when we summon transcode. We use transcode effect, summon Update Jammer, and then we go into access code and make access code 5300 with its effect. Use Update Jammer's effect to attack twice, and that's 10,600 damage, while clearing 2 monsters out, or even, no, sorry, clearing 3 monsters out because we have a Dark, we have a Wind, and we have an Earth Engrave, so we can clear 3 cards on the field. So really good for these like budget Cybers type decks. But that is also the downfall, because you can't use Transcode's effect if you've special summoned anything else besides a Cybers. But pretty fun and pretty cool if you're going to go ahead and go for this type budget build. Another good link too are these Earth Charmers or Light Charmers or any other attribute charmer. I'd probably recommend the Light one or the Earth one, but basically these are link 2 monster. They're 2 monsters including the attribute that they are, and then when they're summoned, you can special summon 1 monster of their attribute from your opponent's grave to your side of the field. So if you're going against a lot of Zodiac, this is a pretty good Earth Charmer is a pretty good card to have. If you're going against a lot of Eldritch and Drytron, you could use the Light Charmer and special summon an Eldritch to your side of the field after you make her. So she's just really, really, really good for this kind of thing. And that can be used then as a material to go to a link 3, like a Unicorn, or even a Transcode Talker. So a pretty good card to kind of have on your mind as a back burner, as a super rare link 2 card that is generally pretty dang good. We can also talk about a couple of these other interesting generic link monsters. Lanferinkus is just a common link 2. It's not great, but it's not bad. It does get monsters to the field. It's very generic. It comes in the Link Structure deck if you bought it. Same thing with the Link Spider, and you can almost call Link Spider a staple for certain decks because it's used for like Eldritch. And anything that becomes a normal monster and you link it away, and then that gets your Eldritch cards into the graveyard. Another good card, not necessarily I need this now for everybody, but keep it in the back of your brain, or when you rewatch this video and you know, what else can I get? Another generic link 2 that was used way back in the day is Underclock Taker. Its drain effect is kind of useful, where it will target one of your opponent's cards, drain it of 800, and then you target one card that it points to, and it gains. No, I'm sorry, not 800. That's a different monster. I apologize. It loses attack equal to the target that it points to. It's not the drain effect like Borrelsword. I'm kind of getting my brain mixed up here. So, 2 effect monsters, once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster this card points to, and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. The opponent target loses attack equal to the attack of the target monster it points to until the end of the turn. So good for attacking over big monsters if you really needed to have it lose like 2,000 to 1,500 attack. My apologies on that. And now we will talk about another really good super rare if you're using some of the Gamma cards, like what we talked about in our Gamma hand traps. Cyframe Gear Gamma can be used with Cyframe Lord Lambda. It's a generic link 2 monsters accept tokens, and basically what it does is it makes it so that Gamma can be used even though you control a monster. So it's actually pretty good if you can special summon a couple monsters. You go into Cyframe Lord Lambda, and then you can kind of protect yourself by having Gamma in hand and keep doing something, because if they try to, say, Nibiru you can go ahead and activate Gamma, and then that will stop the Nibiru. And then you could do some other cool stuff, like overlay into some of the psychic monsters like Zeta or Omega. So pretty cool card, also just a generic link too to help to link climb. I would recommend it if you're looking for things to kind of fill out your extra deck and you have some super rare stuff that you need. Also, as I said, works really well with the hand trap, but not necessary for everybody to have. Some other cool little tidbits that you could do would be Cross Sheep. This card is another generic link too, but it works really well with like ritual monsters or fusion monsters, and so it has a different effect depending on which monster you summon. So you summon Cross Sheep, and then if a monster is special summoned to the zone it points to, if it's a ritual, fusion, synchro, or X-Seeds, it has a different effect. So pretty useful if you're going for like the Drytron deck and you need something to round out the extra deck, or if you're going for like Shadal or Prank Kids. It's a really good card, and I'd kind of recommend it. And a last one, I want to talk about him. He isn't being used right now, but he's gonna be. And you need to be prepared for this because when Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, or DPE, comes out, this card is going to be everywhere. Basically, this is a very generic Link 2, and then you pay 2,000 life points, you send a fusion card from your deck to the grave, and then you can perform the fusion card's text. So this card is really useful for, say, like Shaddoll Fusion, or Super Poly, or Fusion Destiny to make Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. A really, really crazy good card that will be very, very prevalent here very, very soon. And then you have Downer Magician. This card is good if you're using Zeus builds, because it can basically slap itself over a rank 3 or lower Exceed in your main phase 2. So say you have a rank 3, a pretty generic rank 3, and then you attack with it into something that's in defense on your opponent's field, and then you put over Downer Magician. So now that's 4 cards on your field, and then you slap Zeus on it. So now Zeus has 4 materials, so there's 5 cards. Zeus has 4 materials, so 2 activations, because remember, it attaches 2 each time to activate. A really, really good card. If you go the Exceeds route. Another honorable mention that I kind of have left out here would be Link Karibo. It is a Link 1 that requires a level 1. Really good in a couple of different decks. Drytron, it can be used, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't remember. I haven't played Drytron in a while. It's just really good for like getting Link material off the field and then using itself. And then it has an effect where if your monster gets attacked, you can tribute it, and then it makes the attack of that monster 0. And then it can come back by tributing the level 1 monster. So it's really good in that aspect. And then there is also another one that I forgot to leave out, and that is Halki Fibrax. And he is only really necessary if you are doing a synchro build. But basically he uses 2 monsters, including a tuner, and then he can special summon a level 3 or lower tuner from your hand or deck, but it can't activate its effects. And then he can also tag himself out for another synchro monster. So usually people tag him out for like Formula Synchron and stuff like that. Herald of the Arclight, things like this. It's a good card, but it's only good if you're using a synchro build, similar to Verte, where if you're doing a fusion build. So that's it. It's a lot. I know there's a couple mishaps in there, but there's just so much when it comes to the extra deck of Yu-Gi-Oh! You have your archetype extra deck cards, and then you have these staple extra deck cards, and there's so many of these cards in between. But really, I've seen that the staples and these extra deck staples are like really the expensive part, and I'm trying to give it you guys to work towards some of the really, really good ones. So honestly, again, 3 Ash Blossom, make that, make an access code. You'll be pretty good from there on. You can even start doing these parallel like seeds with a code talker to help you climb up into an access code. And that's pretty cheap, relatively, besides the ultra rares, to kind of link climb. So thank you guys again. I appreciate you watching this video. If you found this helpful, make sure you like the smash button, subscribe, and if you feel like watching some Master Duel streaming, I'll be streaming over at twitch.tv/Tidus2172, and I'll be doing a lot more Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel content. For instance, my next video will probably be some gold and platinum ranked commentary on a meta Tri-Brigade deck that I built and a meta Shaddoll Invoked deck that I built. So I appreciate it for hanging out with me. Thanks again, and happy dueling, guys.